My boyfriend's ex sent him nude pictures, so I confronted him and found out he had been cheating throughout our entire relationship. It's finally gaining some traction. I won't name the podcast because of privacy concerns and the fact that I appear in some of the episodes. He's far from famous, but he's gaining recognition. I used to be the major co-host, but I've been too busy with work lately to be really active on the podcast. Obviously, you cannot have a podcast with just one person. It would be dull. So Isaac informed me that he had found someone to be a more consistent co-host when I was unavailable. I told him that was fantastic and inquired who it was. He told me her name was Abigail and even provided me her Instagram. It didn't appear that he was hiding anything, so everything seemed okay. About a week later, we were having dinner with our friend group when Isaac's best friend, Josh, commented in front of everyone that he was astonished by how fine I was with Isaac working with his ex-fling. Let's just say my reaction was the polar opposite of cool. I was more outraged that Isaac had lied to me than anything else. Why would he feel compelled to lie about something like that? I like to think of myself as quite laid back about these things. Would I have felt awkward? Yes, but the show is taped at the apartment Isaac and I share, and I highly doubt he is cheating on me. We're really serious and have even discussed marriage recently. But what about the fact that he was lying? That's the only red flag he's ever shown me, and it just feels strange. When we went home, I made him tell me about it. He told me that approximately a year before we met, he had a friends with benefits relationship with Abigail. Apparently, he stopped relations with her because he desired something more serious with labels, but she refused. Again, not really disturbing, but he lied to me. The way his best friend expressed it, almost in awe as if the concept was unfathomable, made me believe there was more to the story. I told Isaac that I wasn't comfortable with him working with Abigail. If he felt compelled to lie about working with an ex-fling, it was probably not the best decision. He stated that if I was unable to co-host the show, he required someone to do so on a regular basis. I told him he'd have to find someone else because I wasn't comfortable with the situation. I emphasized that I would have been fine with it if he hadn't lied, but he squandered the opportunity. I even went so far as to imply that if he continued talking to her, I might have to reassess our relationship. He eventually consented, but he has been giving me the silent treatment for the past few days. Our friends are aware of what occurred as a result of the mid-dinner announcement. They are split 50-50ths. Some of my friends suggest I should give him a break because he didn't mean to lie and didn't want to harm my feelings. They insist that Isaac is a decent person, but now I have a very horrible feeling about it. I'm scared that I overreacted. Other things like this have happened previously, now that I think about it. But so many of our friends believe I'm overreacting to a minor mistake. I believe they might be correct. Small things like this have happened before, but the truth is that I adore Isaac. I am willing to keep trying for him, but I can't get rid of this bad feeling in my gut. My friends suggest I should keep talking to him about it, but I have no idea what to say at this point. I urgently need some guidance. Edit. For those who are rushing to break up, I want to clarify that I genuinely like this man. We have been dating for 4 years. We have a child. Well, I'm kidding. She's a cat. I recognize that terminating things may be the only option, but right now I'd like to focus on advice rather than hearing how I should end things. Isaac has been with me through one of the most difficult times in my life, the loss of my sister. He is strong, kind, and, in the best possible way, an airhead. If we have to break up, we'll alter gears, but right now all I need is some brutal honesty and advice on what to speak to him about. Edit. He does have another job because we can't live on my income and the show alone. He works today while I work evenings. I'll only have an hour to speak with him, and I want it to be a long conversation, so I'll wait till I'm off on Friday. I'm not sure what I'll say yet, but I will figure it out. Thank you for all of your responses, and I will keep you updated. Update 1. August 3rd, 2024. I hope this reaches everyone who watched and commented on my post. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who helped me think of things to ask him. I can't thank you enough. I was diagnosed with acute anxiety when I was 10 years old. I spent the entire morning pacing and had a little anxiety attack before speaking with him. Normally, things like this would make me cry, no matter how big or small, but I'm happy to say I stood my ground. He gave me coffee this morning, as he almost always does. He has been chatting to me more lately, yet there is still this strange barrier between us. He kissed my forehead, and we had breakfast together. He told me about work, and everything felt so right. But deep down I knew that nagging feeling wouldn't go away unless I talked about Abigail. So, in the most awkward way possible, I said, "We need to talk." Isaac grimaced, and then nodded. shocking me with the words, "We do." 1 point for anxiety. We talked for around 2 hours. I will recap our chat. The first question I asked was how long they had been in contact. He informed me they met in a psychology class at college and were in the same study group. This added up, as I know he's still connected to that group. Some of the guys, including Josh, are his best pals. He informed me they maintained contact via group chat, but had not chatted one-on-one until recently. The second question I asked was why he didn't inform me. I teared up as I asked, and he instantly began apologizing excessively. I told him that it hurt to hear it from Josh rather than from him. He explained, "I didn't think it was a big problem. I realize it's foolish, but I didn't think about it." He stated that they aren't close friends, and she merely seemed like a nice alternative for me until I could get back to being active on the program. I asked him why he chose her. He added that he wanted to cover more issues about college life, classes, and study strategies, and she was a good fit because she was a part of his life at the time. He told me that he loves me and did not mean to hurt me. He stated that he knew it would make me uncomfortable, which is why he did not inform me. He was worried about my worry. I became upset and informed him that it was not his decision. He agreed, apologized, and promised not to do it again. He also stated that Abigail will no longer be a part of the program and that he did not want to make me uncomfortable on purpose. I agreed, claiming I did not want her on the podcast. Then the tables turned. Just as I thought everything was good, he said something unexpected. "There's something else." She sent me nudes. What the __? I felt my heart shatter a little and wondered how he replied. He showed me the texts, which were 2___ days old. He said, "I'm flattered, but I have a girlfriend," but did not block her. I requested he stop communicating with her, but he refused, claiming it would make things difficult with his friend circle. I retorted, "I'm your _girlfriend, and yeah, this situation is already awkward." I questioned how he'd respond if Josh emailed me nudes. That hit him hard. He admitted to cutting Josh off and expecting me to do the same. He nodded, agreeing to block her. I saw him block and erase her contact. Even after that, I didn't feel satisfied. He saw the nudes 2 days earlier, but did not notify me. That was my breaking point. I responded, "Maybe honesty isn't as important to you as it is to me. But if one of your friends sent me nudes, I would tell you within minutes." I kept going, eventually breaking down in tears, and he began to cry too. He kept apologizing and explaining that he hadn't brought it up with me because he believed I was avoiding him, and he wanted to wait until he knew I was prepared to talk. This seemed like ___ since he was giving me the silent treatment. In my previous post, I stated that I was not considering breaking up, but now I am unsure. I understand that this was not the update you were hoping for, but I assure you that there will be another. I told him I needed some space. I'm a person who rarely sets limits until I'm extremely offended. He apologized and attempted to hold me, but I moved away. I'm writing from my best friend's apartment, where I'm spending the night. I told Isaac we might chat again in a few days, but for now, I needed to think things through. The truth is, he cried when I mentioned ending things. Isaac never cries. The only time I've seen him cry in our 4-year relationship was when his mother died. I know he loves me, but I feel lied to. Maybe I'm overreacting, but right now I feel betrayed. I apologize, and I understand this was not the update you were hoping for, but thank you to everyone. If you want to give me some advice, please do so. I'm not sure where to go next, and still have questions for him. I'm also comfortable with addressing inquiries, and I'll try to keep you updated if anything else happens, good or bad. And in case you were wondering, yes, I did bring our cat with me. Update 2, August 27th, 2024. I apologize for the extended time between posts. A lot has happened, and I honestly don't know where to begin, but I'll start with this. We split up. I ended up contacting Abigail. Some commentators thought it was clever, so I reached out to her on Instagram and asked for her side of the story. She didn't know who I was at first. She then seemed astonished that I had contacted her. She recognized me based on what Isaac had told her, but he said we began dating last month, not 4 years ago. This knowledge baffled me, and I wanted to know more. We met for coffee, and she told me they'd been hooking up every now and then. In her words, perhaps once or twice every 6 months, for years. She burst into tears and hugged me, admitting that she had no idea I'd been his girlfriend for so long. Apparently, their FWB relationship had never ended, and he had been cheating on me throughout our time together. She assured me that they were secure and that I shouldn't be concerned. But to be honest, I kind of blanked. I was with this dude for 4 years. I do not blame her in the slightest. I believe she wishes to maintain contact. but it is currently too painful to speak with her. It's not her fault. It's entirely Isaac's. But I simply can't deal with anything remotely related to him right now. I'm not sure if Josh was aware of this, but if he was, I doubt he would have mentioned it at dinner that night. I apologize for the lengthy delay in providing this update. I broke up with Isaac via text, classy I know, and informed him that my closest friend would come by to retrieve his belongings. I also brought our cat and mentioned that I wanted to keep her. He fought the separation, claiming that couples therapy could help, but I told him that 4 years of deceit could not be fixed. I'm now living with my best friend, and we're having some serious girl time. I'm torn up, but I know this was for the best, and staying would have hurt worse. Sorry for the late update, and thank you for your advice. Update 3, August 28, 2024. This is the last update. I wasn't going to post this, but I felt it would be a somewhat brighter conclusion for some of you, frankly, for me as well. Josh ended up phoning me yesterday night. I didn't respond at first, fearing that Isaac was attempting to reach me through him. However, after the third call, I did. This guy sounded angry. The first words he spoke were my name. I am so _ sorry. He didn't give me a chance to say anything before going off on a tangent about Isaac being a jerk and how he couldn't believe he'd been best friends with him for so long. He told me that he paid a surprise visit to my previous apartment, which was not unusual for him, and was perplexed when he realized I no longer lived there. Isaac admitted to cheating on me, which Josh had suspected. You were correct. He made that comment at dinner to warn me. Some things I've realized. Isaac was possessive. He refused to let me hang out with our male friends one-on-one, and he was always hovering next to me. Josh told me that he informed our entire buddy group about Isaac's actions, and while 2 or 3 of them supported Isaac, the rest felt awful for me and cut off communication with Isaac and those 2 guys. Josh informed me that if I needed anything, he'd be there for me, and he apologized again, saying he should have told me sooner when he spotted the indications but never imagined Isaac had been cheating for so long. So, sure, I suppose I could do another update if something significant happens, but this is where I am. Relevant comments where the OP has responded. What made Josh suspect cheating? OP. Last year, I was away for a week with some pals to go camping. He apparently made one of his customary stops to check if Isaac wanted to hang out, but Isaac refused to answer the door. Josh believed he heard a female voice and noises. Isaac ended up telling him I was on the phone with him, which is false because I had no service during the entire camping trip. When asked to hook up with Josh, the OP said, I already said this to a reply up there, but Josh is the last person I want to see right now. Frankly, I do not wish to date anyone. I just found out that the man I wanted to marry has been cheating on me throughout our relationship. I'm probably not going back into the dating pool for at least a year, and I prefer a strong emotional connection before sleeping with someone. Josh is a fantastic buddy, but it was difficult to hear his voice over the phone because he was so closely attached to Isaac. Now to the next story. Story 2. My parents cut me off from marrying my husband, but now they want back in my life after hearing about my pregnancy. What should I do? I, 28F, have always had a problematic connection with my parents, particularly when it comes to their expectations for my future. Growing up in a privileged area, I was always compared to my older sister, Amber, 30F. Amber excelled at everything she did, earning straight A's in school and eventually becoming a successful lawyer at a famous New York company. In contrast, I was a more free-spirited individual. I excelled well in school but loved art and literature over science and math, which my parents prized so much. Our family is from old money. My father, Richard, 60M, is a rather affluent individual, whereas my mother, Rose, 58F, comes from a similarly wealthy family and devotes the majority of her time to various charity organizations, more for the social element than true philanthropy, if I'm being honest. They've always been obsessed with preserving our social standing and connections. My parents planned out my entire life from the day I was born. I was meant to attend an Ivy League institution, preferably Harvard like my father, major in business or law, marry someone from a good family, defined as equally affluent and well-connected, and eventually take over the family firm alongside Amber. But that is not the life I envisioned for myself. I was always more interested in the arts. I enjoyed painting, writing poetry, and visiting the city's museums. My parents saw these pursuits as cute pastimes, but not anything to build a career on. They pushed me into more appropriate extracurricular activities, such as tennis lessons and internships at my father's firm during the summer. I went along with it all to maintain the peace, but I never felt like I genuinely fit into the world they envisioned for me. When I was accepted to Brown University, my parents were disappointed that it wasn't Harvard but believed it was okay. They hoped that surrounding me with the right kind of people would finally put me on the road they had always desired. They had no idea that it would bring me to the person who would forever transform my life. I met Chad, 29M, in my sophomore year of college. We actually bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop. I was racing to get to class and hadn't looked where I was going, while he was leaving with a tray full of coffees for his study group. The accident caused hot coffee to fly everywhere, ruining both of our clothes. Instead of getting furious, Chad laughed and said, "Well, I guess this is one way to break the ice." We ended up skipping our lectures and spending hours conversing. Chad was everything my parents would dislike, which made him the more enticing to me. He hailed from a working-class family in a tiny town in Ohio. His father was a manufacturing worker, and his mother worked as a waitress. Chad was attending Brown on a full scholarship and working part-time to support himself. He was learning to be a teacher and was enthusiastic about education and making a difference in children's lives. From our first meeting, I felt Chad was something unique. He was nice, amusing, and really hardworking. He had a unique ability to make me feel noticed and understood. Chad allowed me to be myself, not the polished, flawless daughter my parents wanted me to be, but the real me, with all my idiosyncrasies and flaws. We began dating, and for the first time in my life, I was actually happy. Chad encouraged my creativity, pushed me to pursue my dreams, and supported me in ways that my family never did. When I informed him about my desire to become a graphic designer, he did not scoff or disregard it as my parents had. Instead, he assisted me in researching programs and internship opportunities. Of course, my parents despised him from the moment they met him. It happened during Parents' Weekend in our junior year. I had been putting off introducing them since I knew it would not go well, but I couldn't do it any longer. The meeting was a fiasco from the beginning. My folks couldn't see beyond Chad's background. To them, he was just a poor youngster attempting to go up the social ladder by dating me. They regularly made disparaging remarks about his attire, which were not designer labels, his modest Midwestern accent, and his profession choice. My mother often asked him whether he was certain he wanted to be just a teacher when there were so many other respectable careers available. My father scarcely recognized Chad's presence, speaking exclusively to me and expressing his disapproval. They didn't care that Chad treated me better than all of the trust fund boys they tried to set me up with. They were convinced he was only interested in our money and social position. When I tried to defend Chad, citing his scholarship and work ethic, my father scoffed. "Oh, honey, don't be naive. Boys like him always have an agenda." Despite my parents' displeasure, Chad and I continued to date throughout college. We encouraged each other throughout late-night study sessions, celebrated our accomplishments together, and discussed our future goals. With Chad, I felt like I could be myself and follow my own path, not the one my parents had planned for me. After graduation, Chad proposed. It wasn't the large, lavish occasion that my folks had expected. We were on a weekend camping excursion, which would never appeal to my parents. Sitting by the campfire under a starry sky, Chad turned to me and said, "I know I can't provide you the luxurious life you grew up with, but I pledge to love and support you in all you do. Will you marry me?" I agreed without hesitation. When we returned from our trip and I informed my folks, all hell broke loose. My mother fell into tears, lamenting how I was wasting my life. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red as he raged about how I was making the worst decision of my life. They called me foolish and short-sighted. "Think about your future," my mother implored. "How do you plan to sustain your current lifestyle? How about your children? Don't you want to give them the best of everything?" I attempted to explain that Chad and I had discussed our future, that we had plans, and that we were ready for the challenges that lay ahead. But they wouldn't listen. To them, marrying Chad meant choosing a life of poverty and misery. When I refused to call off the engagement, they offered me an ultimatum: either end things with Chad or they would cut me off totally. No more financial assistance, no trust fund, no inheritance, nothing. "If you're so focused on living like a commoner, then you can do it without our money," my dad advised me. I was astounded by their reaction. I knew they wouldn't be pleased, but I didn't expect them to go that far. In that moment, I recognized that their love and support were always conditional. As long as I did what they wanted and fit into their narrow definition of success, I was their daughter. But the moment I took my own route, they were ready to dismiss me. I chose Chad, We married in a short ceremony with only a few close friends present. It wasn't the extravagant social wedding my parents had envisioned for me, but it was beautiful in its simplicity and honesty. Amber did not even show up for the wedding. She agreed with our parents and told me I was making a big mistake. The day after my wedding, I got a cold, official letter from my parents' lawyer. It informed me that I had been removed from their will, leaving Amber as the sole heir to their money. It further indicated that I was no longer welcome in the family home and that any future attempts to contact my parents would result in legal action. It stung more than I could have expected, and not because of the money. Chad and I were both employed and doing well. However, it hurt since my own family had prioritized their archaic ideals and social position over my happiness. The parents who reared me, whom I believed loved me unconditionally, had abandoned me because I did not fit into their ideal image. We had no communication for 3 years. I attempted to reconcile several times in the beginning, sending letters and leaving voicemails on holidays and birthdays, but my efforts remained unacknowledged. I eventually quit trying. During those 3 years, Chad and I created a life together. We both worked hard. I was a graphic designer for a small advertising business, and Chad was a high school English teacher. We purchased a little house in a quiet neighborhood, adopted a rescue dog named Max, and were genuinely content. Sure, we didn't have the same privileges as I did growing up. We couldn't afford costly vacations or fashionable clothes, so we had to budget wisely to make ends meet. But we had love and respect for one another, which was more valuable than any money. For the first time in my life, I felt as if I was living truly, pursuing my own aspirations rather than others' expectations. 3 years after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. Chad and I were over the moon. We hadn't been actively trying, but we both wanted children and were eager to begin this new chapter in our lives. We chose to wait until after the first trimester before telling anyone, just to be safe. Amber texted me about a week after we began sharing the news with our friends. It was the first time I had heard from her in 3 years. The message was brief and to the point. Mom and Dad learned about the baby. They want to chat. Call them. I was shocked. How did they find out? I hadn't notified anyone in my family, and as far as I knew, we didn't have any mutual friends who may have shared the news. After discussing it with Chad, I decided to phone them. Perhaps, I thought, the prospect of becoming grandparents had softened their hearts. I called, and my mother answered on the second ring. The talk seemed awkward. My mother performed the majority of the talking, and I could hear my father breathing heavily in the background, occasionally grunting in agreement. She congratulated me on my pregnancy and then, for no apparent reason, began discussing how they wanted to make amends and be present in their grandchild's life. There was no apology for how they treated me and no acknowledgement of the anguish they had caused. It was as if the previous 3 years of stillness had never occurred. Then my mother mentioned giving us some gifts for the baby. Before I could respond, she rattled off a list of items they wanted to purchase, including a high-end stroller, a custom-made crib, expensive baby outfits, and even a new family car. I was stunned. The goods she described might easily cost more than $10,000. It seemed less like a peace gesture and more like they were attempting to buy their way back into my and my child's lives. My mother became unhappy when I respectfully declined, explaining that Chad and I had already begun preparing for the baby. "Don't be ridiculous," she exclaimed. "You cannot provide for this child in the same manner that we can. We are only trying to help. Don't let your pride stand in the way of providing your baby the finest possible start in life." The conversation concluded with my mother stating that they would send the gifts regardless and that they expected to be active in their grandchild's life. She never asked how I was feeling, how my pregnancy was progressing, or how Chad was doing. It was all about the gifts and what they expected. Chad was upset when I ended the call. When I informed him about the talk, he thought my parents were trying to undermine us by demonstrating that they could provide for our child in ways that we couldn't. "They're trying to buy their way into our lives," he explained, walking around our modest living room. "And once we accept these gifts, they'll use it as leverage to make demands about how we raise our child." I knew Chad had a point, but a part of me hoped it was merely my parents' poor attempt to reconnect. Perhaps if we gave them a chance, they might learn to accept Chad and our life together. "Maybe they've changed," I murmured, but I didn't believe it. Maybe becoming grandparents has made them realize what's truly important. Chad asked me, "Do you really believe that? Or are you just hoping it's true because you miss them?" His words struck home. I do miss my family, despite everything. I missed the good times. Family meals, Christmas parties, and secret jokes that only we knew. But I couldn't forget the terrible times, the relentless pressure, the criticism, the way they dismissed me when I didn't meet their expectations. Chad claims he'll back any decision I make, but I can sense he's not comfortable taking anything from my parents. He is concerned that they will attempt to exercise control over our lives and our child's upbringing. We've been doing fine on our own, he says. We don't need their money or their approval. Amber has been blowing up my phone, alternately guilt-tripping me for nursing a grudge and gushing about being an aunt. She does not seem to grasp why I'm hesitant to accept our parents' offer. They're trying to make things right, she says. Why can't you just let the past go? But it isn't that simple. The past is more than simply the past. It has influenced who I am and the path I've chosen. So, Reddit, what should I do now? I desperately need some helpful suggestions on what to do. Update 1. It's been nearly a month since my previous post, and a lot has happened. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for their advice and support. After much debate with Chad, we decided to decline my parents' present offer. It was not an easy decision, but we believed it was the best one for our family. I called my mother and explained that while we appreciated the gesture, we didn't feel comfortable accepting such pricey gifts. I attempted to keep the conversation pleasant and said that if they wanted to be a part of our child's upbringing, we could start with simple steps, such as having dinner together to discuss things. My mother did not take it well. She accused me of being ungrateful and inflexible and that I was denying my child opportunities out of spite. You're making a huge mistake, she explained. You're going to regret this when your child grows up without the advantages we can provide. I stood my ground, however. I emphasized that Chad and I could provide for our child and that all we wanted from them was a connection, not financial possessions. My mother ended the call by hanging up on me. I believed that was the end of it, but I was mistaken. A few days later, a truck arrived at our house loaded with all of the things my mother had indicated, including the stroller, crib, baby clothes, and even a set of keys to a new car parked on our street. A note was attached, reading, "For our grandchild. We will not allow your stubbornness deny them the best." Chad and I were startled. We had no idea what to do with all this stuff. It felt like a violation of our limits. We opted to store everything in the garage for the time being until we could figure out what to do. Chad wanted to send it all back right away, but I hesitated. The matter became more difficult when Amber showed up at our door the next day. She was ecstatic about the baby and the gifts, as if nothing had ever gone wrong between us. "Isn't it wonderful?" she exclaimed. "Mom and Dad are really pleased to be grandparents. They want to do anything they can to help." I attempted to convey our perspective to her, but she did not appear to grasp. "Why are you being so difficult?" she inquired. "Most individuals would be delighted to receive such wonderful gifts. You're acting as if Mom and Dad are the criminals here." The talk immediately escalated into an argument. Amber accused me of being selfish and clinging on to old grudges. "They're trying to make amends," she insisted. "Why can't you just accept their love and move on?" At that point, I lost my temper. "Love?" I asked. "Is that what you call ignoring me for 3 years and then attempting to buy their way back into my life? That is not love, Amber. That is control." Amber stormed out, accusing me of making a tremendous mistake. "You're going to push them away for good this time," she told me. "And it'll be your fault when your child grows up without grandparents." To make matters worse, knowledge of the problem has spread throughout our extended family. I've been getting calls and texts from aunts, uncles, and cousins begging me to reunite with my parents. "They're your parents," my Aunt Sharon explained after a particularly difficult phone call. "Obviously, parents want to spoil their grandchild. Why are you fighting this so hard?" I tried to explain how the years of no contact made this feel less like a real attempt at reconciliation and more like a ploy to buy their way back into our life. However, it is difficult to explain to those who have not experienced it firsthand. Chad remained at my side, supporting my actions while also providing a fresh viewpoint when necessary. "We don't need their money," he tells me. "We're doing well on our own. Our child will have everything they need, including love, support, and 2 parents that cherish them." I'm 16 weeks pregnant, and instead of enjoying this precious moment, I'm stressed and conflicted. The gifts are still sitting in our garage, a reminder of the decision we must make. Chad wants to give everything to a local women's shelter, but I am hesitant. When we do that, it feels as if we're closing the door on any chance of reconciliation. Amber keeps sending me photographs of baby outfits and nursery ideas while pretending as if nothing is wrong. My parents have not contacted me directly since the gifts came, but I know they are waiting for a response. The pressure from family members continues, with new calls and messages arriving daily. As my pregnancy grows, I realize we have to make a decision soon. We can't keep those gifts in the garage forever, so we need to start getting ready for the baby's birth. But every time I believe I've made a decision, I start doubting myself. Chad and I have discussed consulting a family counselor to help us manage this scenario. Perhaps an outside perspective will help us find a way ahead that has not occurred to us yet. For the time being, we are taking each day as it comes. I'm trying to focus on the positive parts of my pregnancy and our relationship, but family turmoil is always present. I just hope whichever decision we make is right for our child. Final update. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I want to tell the outcome of our predicament. A lot has changed, and I have made some difficult but essential decisions. After weeks of debating what to do, Chad and I decided to consult a family counselor. We had multiple sessions, both together and individually, to discuss our feelings concerning the issue with my parents. The counselor helped us understand our priorities and values, as well as how to set good limits. During this moment, my family put more pressure on me. My parents, seemingly frustrated by our lack of response, began arriving at our house unannounced. They would knock on the door for hours, saying they just wanted to talk. It was quite stressful, particularly as my pregnancy progressed, and I dealt with the physical agony that accompanied it. Amber maintained her guilt trip, sending daily texts about how I was pulling the family apart. She even threatened to take me out of her life if I didn't reconcile with our parents, despite the fact that we hadn't spoken for several years. The tipping point occurred when I was around 32 weeks pregnant. My parents arrived at my employment, causing a disturbance in the lobby. They demanded to meet me, claiming they had a right to be part in their grandchild's life. My coworkers were uneasy, and my manager had to beg them to leave or he'd contact the police. That experience reminded me that my parents had not changed at all. They were still attempting to control my life, disregarding my boundaries and preferences. It wasn't about love or reconciliation. It was about achieving what they wanted, no matter the cost. After consulting with Chad and our counselor, we made the difficult decision to maintain no contact with my parents and Amber. We issued an official cease and desist letter through a lawyer, warning that any further attempts to contact us would constitute harassment. We donated all of the baby gifts to a nearby women's shelter, as Chad had advised months before. It was hard to let go of them, yet it felt right. We did not want our child's life to begin with strings attached. The day after we submitted the letter, I blocked my parents and Amber on all platforms. It was one of the most difficult things I'd ever done, but also the most liberating. The continual worry and anxiety I'd been experiencing began to subside almost immediately. Our daughter, Susan, was born 2 months ago. The birth was tough, and there were times when I wished I had my mother around. But Chad was fantastic throughout the entire process, and we made it through together. These first few weeks of parenthood have been tough, but extremely gratifying. Susan is perfect, and seeing Chad with her makes me fall in love all over again. We may not have all of the luxury gifts my parents wanted for us, but we do have love, which is more than enough. Looking at Susan, I am more certain than ever that we made the correct decision. I want her to grow up in a family full of love and respect rather than continual judgment and attempts at control. I want her to understand that her worth is not based on money or prestige, but on who she is as a person. Yes, she will not have the materialistic privileges that my parents could have offered, but she will have parents who love her unconditionally and support her aspirations, no matter what they are. She'll grow up knowing that it's acceptable to set boundaries, advocate for herself, and forge her own route in life. This has been a challenging trip, but I do not regret our decision. We're going forward, concentrating on our small family and the promising future ahead of us. Thank you to everyone who has helped us on this journey. Your advice and nice words have meant more than you know. Here's to new beginnings and choosing happiness, even when it's the more difficult way. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.